Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Zodiac Bandit, and today we're going to be recapping and giving my thoughts of Campaign 3 of Critical Role, Episode 17. Said that out of order, but you know what? Still works for me. Yeah, this was a fun episode, a little slower than most. Probably the slowest as far as growing the plot and giving us important names and events that have been going on, especially lately, following the ball. There's been quite a lot happening within the last 4 to 5 episodes. So this one was a lot more slow paced, more character building, and heavy travel. The second half was all travel, and it was interesting, and I can't wait to break it down a little bit further right now. So they start the session in the Soot and Swill after a well needed rest after fighting the Shade Mother in the episode before. Chetney had missed his call at 3 a.m. exactly, so there was no fun time with him and Fern. We start with Imogen in her dreams. She is seeing the usual storm and she hears her mother call out to her telling her to run, but then she sees the stone in her hands and the stone kind of tells her that there might be other options. She wakes up, talks to Laudna a little bit, and eventually everyone else starts to wake up, and they identify this stone that they stole from the Shade Mother, and they learn that it is a sort of stone from the Feywild that corrupts things and changes things around it. It just makes things different, makes things stranger. So they're very, very weary of the thing. At this point, everyone's up. I believe Laudna goes and checks on good old Chetney to make sure that he's all right, and he kind of, plays it off a little bit and says he'll get another chance, or he'll try to get another chance with Fern. So they all decide they're going to go finally talk to Jenna Huxham about the mission they have to in Heartmoor. Heartmoor. So they can finally move forward with that plot line. They get to her house and they, have to wait for her in the front foyer. And she eventually comes down and they discover this statue that, if they get close enough to it, it changes its face to their face to kind of ward off anybody who's invading in Jenna Huxham's home. And Fern grabs Chetney and it kind of try to make them, pick between the two faces, and it just makes an amalgamation of the both of them. So we now know what Chetney and Fern's child will look like if they ever do have some fun times without protection. She tells them that the mission is to go and sort of steal from a friend of hers or a rich acquaintance slash rival, and it is in the museum at Heartmoor. So they have to make their way there, and he is going to tell them exactly it is what they're going to steal. However, it seems that another person has entered the fray, someone that wasn't necessarily involved in the first place, but has sort of weaseled their way into the competition, and they have also sent someone else to partake in this sort of contest to see if his defenses are better than Jenna Huxham's defenses. After that, they're told that they can get a 300 gold piece sort of travel thing, but they choose to take it in the form of a 300 gold worth of diamonds, so they can use Revivify now if need be, which is perfect. They've been taking quite a beating lately, so I would imagine that at some point that is going to be necessary. So it looks like the threat of death for at least one person is now no longer existent. After that, they're probably in some trouble. So they elect to break up into different groups. Chetney and Imogen go to get horses. Laudna and Fern go to tell Esteros of their plans, what's been going on, and what they met with the Shade Mother. And we have the last group of FCG, Ashton, and Orym heading to Milo, the friend in the Core Spire, who can repair FCG. And we start with Laudna and Fern going to Lord Esteros. They kind of catch him in the middle of his breakfast, and they begin to break down what's happened over the last session or two. And at first, he's a little put off by them because it is probably the two worst people you want to go have to explain in detail what's happened. But they tell him about the Shade Mother, Lady Emoth, and the Green Seekers, and how everything went down with that. Afterwards, we get FCG, Orym, and Ashton with Milo, where Milo is able to remove FCG's arm and sort of give him an upgrade. And now he can swap out his arms much faster. He is able to go from his saw blade arm to his grapple arm within the same action. So he can now remove it and then still use it all in one turn, which is a considerable boon. That is very good and something I thought he should have had probably from the beginning if he was going to do something like that. But it was nice of Matt to kind of hold off on it for a while. I don't know if that was part of like a level up that he got for whatever his class is or whatever his race is to be able to do that. But they held off on it long enough to where I don't believe it's a level up feature for his race or class. So, who knows with that. And then we cut to Chetney and Imogen trying to pick out horses. They pick out 5 of varying colors, and instead of outright buying them for quite a bit of coin, they elect to sort of rent it for a 150 base set and then 150 extra as a deposit just in case the horses don't come back, which throughout the episode Chetney and Ashton make it very clear that they do not believe these horses will be making it back. And that is the first half. Eventually they meet up at the sort of exit to the city, and they're able to sort of all get together and they start heading out into the Odiran Wildlands, and that is the first half of the episode. So the first half was a lot of prep for leaving, a lot of getting things ready to make sure that they're able to leave without leaving any important stuff behind, like Estos. They kind of told him everything they needed to. In the second half, we get a little bit of travel and a handful of nights of resting and character growth. There's a few things I'm going to mention. So on the second night, I believe. No, I'm not gonna skip to the first night because the first thing they did was they encountered a rabbit with a large rabbit-like creature with a pink stone in his mouth, and it took Orym a little while to get it, but he was able to snatch it. And they learned that it was a sort of arcane focus for a sorcerer, but it also gave Imogen, who attuned to it, wild magic capabilities if need be, which is a little scary, especially for this chaotic group. So Matt seems to like to put chaos within his games, and I'm all here for it. The wild magic table, while not terribly dangerous, is still entertaining and fun. So hopefully we'll be able to see, unless he's made his own. If he's made his own, that'll be nuts. But hopefully we get to see some cool wild magic sorceries stuff as Imogen uses her magic now. So then we get to the second night of travel, which is the one that I want to focus on the most a little bit right now, where we learn about Laudna. Orym and Laudna are on watch, and, Laudna's kind of distracted by Pate doing some Pate. She's controlling Pate, making a sort of shadow puppet show off the fire, and Orym kind of wants to get serious and talk about her experiences in Whitestone, what it was like for her, and does she remember her death. And she kind of outright tells us that she was one of the people who were killed by the Briarwoods to send a message to Vox Machina. It's unclear if she was to be Keyleth's or Vex's, but based on her black hair, I'm going to assume it was Vex. And at first, this irked me a little bit. I was a little upset that they, yet again, continue to pile on the Campaign 1 Vox Machina callbacks. And at first, I was thinking that it kind of takes away from Campaign 3 and sort of doesn't give it its own identity. However, they're actually running with it really well with all these callbacks, and it's only the two characters of Orym and Laudna who are really doing this. So it was nice that those two specifically, the two people who would know about those things, were the ones that talked about it. Because if she had said that to Chetney would have just been like, yeah, cool, you're on a tree. But Orym got to understand the gravity of what she was saying, that how she was a tool and her life was, forfeit to the Briarwoods. And we get to hear and see like the weight that that sort of thing carries of her dying and her tragedy of being killed. And she gets to tell us that, like, Orym points out that she's the happiest person in the group, and she points out that the worst day of her life has already happened, so of course she's happy. So that is an incredible takeaway from that, and it was something that I was against at first. But very quickly the conversation made me turn my opinion around, and I hope that if there is any more Campaign 1 Vox Machina callbacks, it is strictly with these two. I hope it doesn't branch out any further than those two, because they are deeply rooted within Campaign 1, their characters. One's directly related to Keyleth and the Arashari, and now one is directly related to the Briarwoods and Whitestone and Percy. So that is interesting. As long as she's not a Derolo, I think I'm going to be fine, because as of right now, it's looking like she's not a Derolo. I'm almost positive, unless that was a long-lost branch of Derolo. So as long as she's not a Derolo, like a lot of people were saying she was, or like a lot of people wanted her to be. But then we get another day's worth of travel where midday a lightning bolt hits a tree and splits it in twain, and they go check it out. Chetney thinks it is a sign, so he starts taking some wood. He's going to use it to obviously make something really cool with. But there's also some sort of weird plant-like growth on the tree that Orym takes, and he learns that it's a blue plant, and as he touches it, he kind of gets shocked a little bit with some lightning damage. They eventually identify it and learn that it is a sort of rose petal or plant that can be used to have resistance on lightning damage, and after 10 damage, it kind of disintegrates, but you take no damage from that shot. And you can blow the petals to sort of send a 20-foot lightning breath cone, which is quite interesting and cool. Maybe we'll see that come up into effect. I'm hoping that Orym doesn't just get hit by lightning and then the thing's gone without him being able to use the lightning breath thing. I really want to see that happen. The next night, we get Chetney and Orym. There's a lot of Orym. A lot of deep Orym conversations in this campaign. Not this campaign, this session. Chetney sort of asks about his ink on his arm with the larger moon and the smaller moon. And I don't know if I missed this in EXU, but Orym sort of drops that he had a husband once upon a time. And he is gone. His name was Will. It's been 6 years since his death, and the only other person in the group currently that knows about it is Fern. Dorian did know, but Dorian is now gone from the group. So, and the whole representation of a large moon and a small moon is Will, the half-elf, and Orym, the halfling. Yeah, he's a halfling. So, small moon, big moon represents the two of them. And it was a nice, sweet moment for Orym, and Chetney got a good moment out of it too, who's not just being a mild joke character all the time. Because that is a lot of what Chetney has been doing lately is, joking and posturing and being the alpha male, blah, blah, blah. But this was a nice, softer moment for him and Orym. So it was nice that these two characters, who I don't think have interacted a whole lot lately, got something cool out of it. And I think that was really interesting and really nice for a slower episode like this to sort of delve into characters like that. So they travel for another day, and this is the last day of travel, or last full thing of travel before they reach Heartmoor. And they end up stopping again at night to rest inside a hollowed out swamp tree, or the roots of a swamp tree. And while Laudna and Ashton are sort of looking out, they see what looks to be some sort of glowing fairy off in the distance. And at first they start to talk to it and antagonize it a little bit, and it starts to float away. So then they start to approach, and it tries to communicate with them telepathically. And they kind of go back and forth for a little while on what to do with this thing. Do they invite it over? Do they shoo it off? Do they go give it protection from the rain? And after a certain point, they kind of wake up Imogen after they realize that whatever it's doing is very similar to how it feels when Imogen talks to you in your head. So she kind of tries to do it, gets some sort of thing back to it, but they all are very successful in saving against it. At one point, Ashton makes his way over to it and tries to give it a tent sort of thing with his sleeves, and then it kind of just doesn't care and tries to communicate with him again. Eventually, they wake up Fern, and Fern tells them to fucking leave it alone. It's some sort of fairy thing. You want to not deal with it. But then she gets up again after pretending to go back to bed, and then says, "So did you guys actually see something?" And she tries to sort of see what it wants, and she fails. She ends up failing her save to resist against it, and she begins walking off into the forest past the creature, and Ashton runs towards it, or towards her, and while this happens, it begins to stop hopping on the ground, and vines begin to be pulled in toward the rest of the forest and everything like that, and a tree creature with tentacles and some sort of this little fairy thing was essentially a lure to pull it in, and now Fern has been pulled in by this lure, and this tree creature with tentacles and a beak of a mouth is making its way out and known to the players, and that is where Matt ends the session. So it sounds like we're starting with combat next session, which isn't next week because I think next week is EXU. So the following week we will finally get to see whatever this mini looks like, because I'm actually kind of intrigued by the way Matt described it. So yeah, like I said at the beginning, lots of character stuff was done. Not a whole lot to progress like the Shade creature plot line that's going on with the Nightmare King, the Shade Mother, and the Shade Creepers. But we got a lot of character stuff, which I really appreciate episodes like this. At first, I wasn't terribly keen on this episode because, like I said, it felt slower and we were getting a lot of preparation in the first half. And, there's a bit of a recap with Esteros and that kind of stuff you can just skip over, in my opinion. But they made up for it quite heavily in the second half with a lot of character stuff. And honestly, I think Matt hits it perfectly on travel in D&D. Travel in D&D can either be really good or it can be really terrible, and Matt does a very good job of making it really good. So yeah, lots of fun stuff. I actually was very against the idea of Laudna being the Vex in the tree thing for a long time. For me, it just didn't make any sense. But now that she kind of explained more of her backstory, because at first I thought she died as they were making their way into the coup. I thought she died right away, and I thought it was really weird that her body would be there for so long before she woke up. But no, she died later, being called in to be, invited into dinner, sort of thing. So she got to experience what life was with the Briarwoods, which was something that I didn't realize she had done. I thought I thought it happened and she was killed right away. So a little different for me now that I have a little bit more context about it. So if I've ever made it semi-clear that I wasn't keen on the idea, now I am keen on the idea. I think it's a great idea. I think she's done an amazing job, and she's just a fucking genius. Marisha has come so far from campaign 1 to campaign 3, and it's mind-blowing and it's amazing. It's been 7 years admittedly, so they've had a lot of play, but she's done quite a bit to improve her backstories, to improve her character. And if I were to compare the 3 Marisha characters, I would probably put Laudna at number 1. She is leaps and bounds more interesting to me than Keyleth was. As much as I liked Keyleth, I thought she was a very basic and safe character, whereas this character is far more tragic and interesting and has a little bit more depth to her than Bo. I thought Bo was very close to having this level of depth, but Laudna has a lot of depth to her. And a lot of it's built off her previous character, not her previous character, off a previous character, which is interesting. So I think Marisha has done an amazing job with Laudna, and I don't think I can praise her enough for it. With that being said, next week is EXU, and I will be... No. Is next week EXU? I think next week's EXU. So I will see you guys on that Saturday. If next week is EXU, I have to look at my calendar. But if EXU is out, I'm going to watch both episodes back to back and give a longer recap because they're going to be coming out on the Thursday and the Friday. So if my calendar is correct, I don't believe I am. I'm not. Next week is just a regular episode. So see you guys next week for a regular episode of Critical Role. So we get to see this tree creature much sooner. So see you guys next week. Actually, see you guys Tuesday, which is next week. I said last week I was getting worse at these fucking outros, and I think I just proved it. Peace.